Yo homies, what is up? It's the Tominator back with another one, and man oh man do I have something interesting in store for you guys today. It's both a tragedy and a comedy depending on your point of view, and I'm sure you can already tell based on the title and the thumbnail that what I'm about to say is a little effed up, but we'll get into that in a moment. So originally, I was just planning on making a video about what causes the ab split. You know, this odd-looking gap you sometimes see between a bodybuilder's ab muscles, like in this pic here of Phil Heath. So when I started Googling to try and figure out what's going on here, the very first search returned some rather, let's just say, intriguing results, okay? So here's a screenshot of what came up, and I tell you what, guys, I wasn't expecting this. Pregnancy, baby center, like seriously, are you kidding me, Google? I know some of these guys may look pregnant, but you're telling me that they are literally showing the same side effects as pregnant women? I mean, come on, you can't write this stuff, man. This shit's ridiculous. It is too funny. I was cracking up when I saw this. Okay, but before we dive down that rabbit hole, let me just clarify something first, and that is that, yes, the ab split is genetic, okay? Certain people just seem to be born with some degree of separation in this area, as we can quite clearly see in a 19-year-old Lee Haney. Now, this is a guy who at this stage of his career, in the year 1979, right, we can be rest assured that he was not taking growth hormone or insulin or any of these other drugs that we normally associate with bubble guts or otherwise abnormal abdomens. And I highly doubt that his waistline was engorging to beach ball-like proportions in the off-season, like what you see so often with bodybuilders today. In fact, I'd be willing to bet that this is a midsection that didn't even know what distension was. You know what I'm saying? It's just always been flat and well-defined. Haney was known for that, and also, of course, being the last Mr. Olympia to be able to hit a vacuum. But anyway, I don't think it's the result of a training injury either. So yeah, this gap you're seeing has got to be 100% genetic at this point. And here he is at the end of his reign in 1991, next to a young Dorian Yates, and as you can see, that distinct split is still there. It may have even widened ever so slightly, but then again, if it did, the difference was negligible. So this feature more or less stayed the exact same over a 12-year period throughout his entire career. And this to me is proof that it is a genetic condition that you either have or you don't, but that's not to say that the drugs and diet don't play a part in it too, because they certainly do. And I'll explain what I mean by that right now. So here's probably the most famous example of split abs in a bodybuilder, and of course we're talking about Ronnie Coleman. But here in his younger days, you can notice that the gap is barely visible at all. It's almost non-existent, maybe a finger's width or so at most, so nothing too dramatic. And here's another pic of him from around the same time period, maybe a year or two later, still barely any separation to be seen there. But now let's jump ahead to 1998, and whoa, what have we here? The gap has widened considerably. The sea has parted, his abs are migrating apart like continental drift, so it's very subtle. One day they're right next to each other, the next they've drifted apart. And no, it's not a fluke, I'm not trolling, your eyes do not deceive you, as here he is again in 1999, clearly displaying a gap, which now appears to be at least a centimeter wider than it used to be. And by 2004, you know, it's become undeniable what's going on. So here's a side-by-side comparison, and you'd have to be blind or just a fanboy in denial to not acknowledge the difference here. But this is just one example because there's actually a couple other noteworthy bodybuilders who exhibit this same effect. Dennis James also had it. So you could see there in 99, his abs were almost touching, but later in his career, they've drifted apart like old friends. And this next guy I think we're all familiar with, and yeah, that's your reigning Mr. O, back in 2005, looking like a friggin' clone of Flex Wheeler. People want to say Phil is an aesthetic. Well, maybe not so much anymore, but genetically speaking, the guy has crazy aesthetics. It's just that playing the mass game kind of ruined his lines over the years. But you'll notice that he did have a bit of a split already here at the beginning of his pro career in 2006. So I think it's safe to say that that's mainly just genetic. And here he is at the 2008 Ironman, and the abs are still in check, nothing's really changed. In 2010, and maybe an ever so slight widening has occurred, but if so, it's barely noticeable. But fast forward to 2011, and oh, okay, now, looks like the migration is underway. The abs have definitely moved a little further apart now here. And by 2013, it's gotten even worse. Still a decent set of abs for what it's worth. I'm not saying this is a horrible midsection or anything. It's not my favorite, however. But all I'm saying is that you can't deny that the split down the middle has expanded. And in 2016, well, it's kind of hard to tell here as you don't really see any definition there in the inner abs. It all just kind of blends together and you can't really tell where one side begins and the other ends, so it's just kind of a mess now and not really that helpful for our purposes here. So for that reason, let's compare them in 2005 to 2013, and again, the difference is quite apparent. Another guy who shares this unfortunate trait is Roelly Winklaar, as we can see here at the 2009 Arnold Classic Amateur Contest. Here in 2014, the gap is still there, and it hasn't really grown much, to be honest. So even here, I think this is from 2015, although it might be 2016, and he still looks more or less the same, which is surprising given how much of a bubble gut he had going on around this time. I would have expected more of an expansion by this point. So Roelly may kind of be an exception to the rule on this. And lastly, one final guy I'm going to show you who has an ab split like no other, and this is Dallas Mccarver. So you can see him here. I believe this was from like maybe 2012, though correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure. But either way, the kid is young, in his early 20s, looking more like a physique competitor than an Olympia-level bodybuilder, and still, this is a gap to rival Ronnie Coleman's in his prime. By 2017, all I can say is...
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Yes, it did. I mean, those abs have shifted so much, I'm not even sure we shouldn't just lump them in with the intercostals at this point, because that's not really where the abs are supposed to be situated anymore. So that is truly a gnarly gap he's got going on there. And just for fun, here's one more of Dallas looking like he's trying to give birth in midair with that distended belly sticking out, and you may think I'm joking about the birth thing, but it's not all that far from the truth actually, because these guys are literally showing the same symptoms as pregnant women. Okay, so this diagram pretty much sums it up. Yeah, so it turns out there's actually a medical term for this condition, and it's called Diastasis Recti, and I hope I didn't just butcher that pronunciation. Now, this typically occurs in pregnant women, although it can happen in men too. When their belly swells and expands, this causes the abs to kind of get pushed outwards to the sides like this. And here they break it down into several different variations, and I'm no doctor, but from what I can tell, looks like most of these bodybuilders fall under the open diastasis category. So there's Kai Green trying to hang with these big old swole bellies over here, but not quite sure he's in their league yet. It's not really a fair playing field after all. I mean, these women are carrying another human being inside of them, and Kai's food baby, no matter how massive and saturated, can't possibly hope to compete with a real baby. So maybe he should have carved up a little more. I recommend beer next time. It's a tried and true solution for men everywhere seeking that coveted pregnant belly look, and Arnold's not impressed. Anyway, you may be wondering if this diastasis recti thing, if this is truly the case, why don't pregnant women show split abs as well? I mean, after all, who's ever seen a pregnant woman with a separated six-pack like Ronnie Coleman? Oh yeah, Dennis Wolf also has this gap, and it's just like the others, it got worse as he got bigger. But in answer to that question, I'll tell you why we don't notice it so much in pregnant women, because they simply don't have that kind of muscle definition or thickly developed abs to begin with. Duh. So these are ordinary women with higher fat levels, not ripped professional bodybuilders on tons of gear, so that should be obvious enough. And this is more or less exactly what I suspected. The ab split is genetic to begin with, but it can and does expand when these guys' guts balloon in the off season. So no, I wouldn't directly blame the drugs like insulin or growth hormone, although they certainly contribute to the development of an ab-splitting bubble gut. But rather, it's the very act of the stomach itself expanding, which seems to cause the abs to further separate and the gap between them to grow wider and more pronounced. So I hope that makes sense and gives you guys something to think about. Feel free to look this up for yourself. I really didn't get into it in too much detail, but at this point, I think it's pretty safe to say that guys like Ronnie and Phil and Dallas are all suffering from this condition called diastasis recti. So that's all for this one, guys. Bit of a weird video, I know. Looks like bodybuilding has become even more of a freak show than most of us ever realized. But hey man, you can't argue with science or the almighty Google. Okay, so let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. So until next time, homies, I'm the Tominator, signing out, and I'll be back.